Hello.
Hello.
Did I get that right? Did you want to say anything else or add anything else?
No, yeah, I mean, you covered the topics that I talk about. I'm an outdoor environmental educator. So I actually teach kids a lot of times during the weekdays, and then I take people out on hikes and evenings and weekends. And then during the pandemic, started making videos about the things that I would teach kids about. And then some of them went viral, especially the festival trails one.
Yeah. Well, I guess, how do you come up with a concept and how do you develop your content?
Well, first of all, because you all are working in communications and telling these stories and coming up with a concept. I have a list a mile long of different things that I want to talk about.
Okay.
A lot of times it just comes down to, okay, what is on the minds of people? What are current events? How do you link things to what people are already thinking about? I think, again, with some of the videos we'll show, we'll kind of highlight that, but with that list that I have and a schedule that I have of what I think I want to put out there, it comes down to what changes, because what people are thinking about and talking about changes really quickly too.
Right, because you kind of have your content calendar in your mind, and you have it planned out, which I'm sure all of you probably have bosses who are like, hey, what are you producing for me today, right? So you have your content calendar, but then something kind of pops up and you're like, hey, I got to take advantage of this, right?
Yeah, I think good is not the right word, and maybe take advantage is not the right word either, but it's definitely not the right word. But an example of this would be just last month when all the fires happened. And so I had my niece was actually here on a J-term January break from college, and she's studying biology, and she wanted to learn about communication and how you communicate things about impacting the environment. And we had all these plans. Plans to go visit a botanical garden and meet the educator. We actually had a plan for a transit-related video to make as well, and then things change. And so that little calendar I had prepared was like, okay, never mind.
Went out the window.
No, and then if that became, well, what? After initial shock, is like, well, what are the lessons? What are the stories that we can tell from that to somehow make things better in a way? Mm-hmm. And so being flexible, because I think for getting attention on social media, I think with any storytelling, you're meeting people where they are coming to what they're focusing on. I can tell some other random story while everyone's just actually focused over here. They're not gonna pay attention.
Well, with that, I think let's see if I can cue up the one that you just did about the fire, or let's do the evergreen one from the fires, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
But no, that's well, I can't even see which ones are.
Oh, right.
I thought we did.
That didn't work. All right,
let's all start playing at the same time.
No, I hope not. No, I did that. That was my mistake.
I think the first one is the Festival's Trail.
The Festival Trail. Yeah, let's do that one first.
Yeah. It's been passed from Paris to Los Angeles, and are we ready? I think I can speak for all Angelinos on this one, and no, we're not. But luckily we have 4 years, and 4 years is a lot of time, and I happen to know about a plan that can help get us ready. Say hello to the Olympic Festival Trail, an actual trail connecting all of the venues across the city for pedestrians, bikes, and nature. But how does this get LA ready? Well, here's what Paris did as an example. 600 miles of bike lanes, bike parking lots, and bike shares at multiple venues. They planted 65,000 shade trees, built 200 pedestrian plazas, closed major streets to car traffic permanently. Yes, they did that. The result? A 50% reduction in traffic, fewer bike and pedestrian deaths, less pollution, and oh look, they're still able to get around town. The Olympic Festival Trail is a plan to start something like that here in LA to connect the venues for pedestrians, bikes, and trees to keep it cool, all connected to Metro, with a plan for affordable housing along the entire route to have a lasting benefit for the city, not just for the Olympics. And I especially love it because part of it is connecting to the LA River bike path, rewilding it as part of the Olympic Trail. Look, it's a daunting task trying to reimagine and reinvent transportation in a city as large as LA, but Paris did it. maybe we can do a version of it ourselves. Contact your local representatives and tell them we need this, not just for the LA 28 Olympics, but for the future of our city. Shout out to Alyssa Walker, who writes the blog Torched about LA Olympic planning. She's the only reason I heard about this trail, and so I made a video so that you could hear about it and advocate for it too.
And when, so you sent this out when?
This was, I schedule posted it to go out the morning after the closing ceremony in Paris. So
everybody was watching Tom Cruise, get the flag from Air Karen Bass, rappel off a building, and then Snoop Dogg do a big thing, and you were like, we should, people are going to be Googling or searching for this. Yeah. And so you thought, hey, this is a perfect time.
Yeah. It just seemed, it'll be what's on people's minds right at that moment, especially. And there were all sorts of conversations going on that morning about different things from that ceremony when it was, especially around here in LA, like, why was it green around the Hollywood sign even though it's August and we all know that it's brown? Or they're saying they're in Venice Beach, Snoop Dogg and Billie Eilish. Right. But if Angelina's know, that was actually Long Beach here.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you could see the oil rigs off the coast. They don't have those in Venice. Anyway, so people are just like, it's the topic everyone's talking about. And I know that...
Well, you know what I noticed? There were no cars in the entire montage. It was all people walking or running or
right,
biking.
And including on the street.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
The people carrying the flag or
torch?
The torch.
Yeah, the torch, yeah.
Yeah, it was presenting a very certain kind of idealized version of Los Angeles that's not real, and that's often what Hollywood does. So it made sense. But because it was so on top of and I wanted to just add that the Olympics themselves are a topic in LA beyond that, especially this idea of whether we should be hosting them at all, when there's so many other priorities that we should be focusing on.
Yeah.
And just are we ever going to be able to be ready? There's all these plans about what we will get done before the Olympics, and so, just always a lot of chatter, but then this was at the fever pitch, the most of any of I think that I've ever seen. So.
And do you know how many views?
That video got 2 million views.
You're so modest. And 1,000 comments, 7,500 shares. I mean, it really just kind of blew up.
Yeah. And people still ask me about what's going on, and that's why I'll be emailing Eli what's going on? What happened with that meeting with Mayor Bass? And, and when can I help and step in to keep spreading the word? Because I think it's important, and I think that the Olympics are an opportunity to help to create some of this infrastructure, some kind of permanent, lasting, positive impact in the community to connect people to each other, and transit is a huge way of doing that.
And it was really great partnering with Jason, who we were like, oh my God, this, and at first, he just kind of posted it and mentioned us, and we're like, oh my God, this is incredible. We were in contact, and we were actually able to generate a couple hundred emails to the mayor saying, hey, just people from LA and across the country saying hey, we really want to see this done. And that helped us generate momentum for our campaign to the point where now the mayor has officially signed on, endorsed it, and we have a strategic advisory. We're doing all this fundraising effort now. So it's really starting to take off, which is really exciting to see. So thank you.
I would say one thing that I wish I had. Well, we didn't really have much of now we and we made a follow-up video that was a little more specific about go to this website, and you can send a letter to the mayor directly through what they'd set up. But I wish I had talked about you beforehand, and then we kind of coordinated that.
But you've been great so far since, and the next one, I'll play the next one, is about, because you're like, hey, what else can we do? And I was like, hey, we've got this thing coming up, SoCal Transit Week, and we had started engaging all content creators in the area to kind of help us out. So we recruited Jason to do a video. We recruited Adam Conover, who is also a comedian. We recruited Hayden Begley, who's Ed Begley Jr.'s daughter. She also works at LA Metro, which is kind of a fun, cool thing. To like just do videos to kind of get people like engaged in the digital space so that they could come and join us in the offline space. So I think that's the next video.
It's LA Transit Week, and I lead hikes in parks all over LA, which got me thinking, how come so many of our parks are so disconnected from transit? I'll give you an example. I recently led a hike here in Elysian Park, and 2 of the hikers came here on public transit. Spoiler alert, it was not easy. They were dropped off here on Baxter, one of the steepest streets in LA. Then they had to walk a mile, including up the Baxter steps, to get to Elysian Park to our hike. Which is like, cool if it's leg day, but that's not accessible at all. In 2019, LA County passed a Transit to Park strategic plan, which had a lot of great ideas like circulars and rail connectors. But as far as I can tell, not much of that has happened. Correct me if I'm wrong. And earlier this year, LA City Council started a Dodger Stadium traffic study, which should include Elysian Park, but we'll see. And if you want to go to a park outside the city, well, good luck. Only 3% of LA County residents live near transit to the mountains. There are 0 bus lines that go through Elysian Park. 0, and only 2 that go through Griffith Park, which gets 10 million visitors a year, by the way. We obviously have a car culture in LA, I know, but the only reason is because public transportation doesn't meet you where you're at or where you need to be. And in case you missed it, the climate is changing. Transportation is the #1 cause of greenhouse gases in California. We need to drive less. Public transportation can help us do that. If you think this is ridiculous like I do, follow and get involved with organizations like Move LA, Streets for All, Nature for All, to advocate for a more connected city that includes our parks.
Awesome. Yeah, and so what I love about what you kind of do, first of all, the energy, right? Like,
that comes from teaching kids. and then also for the videos, that was pandemic teaching kids over Zoom, and I'm like,
oh God.
I would kind of, the way I work, I would join a class that was already there, so I had like an hour. And these kids are just like eyes glazed over, completely distracted by everything else. And I'm like, hey kids, you know?
Jazz hands.
That's just like, you know, the energy. Yeah. And for social media, you're scrolling through. It's the same kind of thing. Like, how do you grab attention really quick, you know?
That's smart. So lessons for everybody out there, go teach in an elementary school for a week, right? Any teachers? My wife's a teacher, so I get it. I'm like, I go and visit her at work, and she's like dancing around the halls, so I totally get it.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. But the other thing that I want you to notice and really hone in on is like the use of like really boring government documents that you are able to like, how do you get those things to just fly in and do all these things? Because you're taking because a lot of you deal with agendas. We got to post our agenda. We got to, put out this document that our department tells us to do. But you've like taken that and made it into something that is a call to action, really.
Yeah. So actually, we were talking earlier. So I used to, before I became an outdoor environmental educator, I worked in government affairs for a nonprofit, and I would do community organizing, but also a lot of like commission meetings and meeting with elected officials to try and convince them to do things that were good for the community. And a lot of that was difficult. But I have a master's in public policy. I spent a lot of time going through complex documents, and so I teach about nature, but then I also am seeing the connections between the decisions that are being made and how that impacts people in the community. And so the call to action is critically important for me. Like a video just educating kind of blindly about something can be fine, could be entertaining, could be fun, but it's like, well, what do you do with that information? Especially if someone's talking about a problem. Like that video is talking about a problem of the parks not being connected. I'm not just gonna tell people, okay, that exists, bye.
Yeah, bye, yeah.
But here's what you can do so that people then, even if it's something as simple as signing a petition that takes a second, because then at least they're engaged and can keep following up on that, and maybe we'll continue to do more action. And I always encourage more than just that. But I think a call to action means like you're continuing, you're building a movement, and you're building community that way too, because now people are joining with other people who care about that. about that issue.
And I think every transit agency has a simple call to action, right? It's to have more public engagement with your board meetings until your board members say enough already. But no, seriously, like there should be a call to action pretty much in anything that you're putting out there in terms, we're taking feedback on this, or we're having this public meeting about this project, right? And I know that sometimes we do a little bit too much of those public meetings, and we need to get to actually building stuff. But this is a great way to kind of use social media to make these boring documents a little bit more engaging, I think. So.
Yeah, and then I think for the boring documents, which are all very important, but for the public, it's like, well, what are the key takeaways here? I think I don't get into all of the weeds, but like, okay, that mobility plan had all these cool ideas in it. Let's pluck out some of the best ideas that I know that people immediately be like, ooh, that sounds cool. Why aren't we doing that? Maybe we should do that. To help build some kind of public support for it. Yeah.
Awesome. And then, so we talked about timing, and the importance of timing and thinking about your content calendar, but also what people are talking about. And I've seen transit agencies do some fun stuff with the meme of the day. But let's talk a little bit about evergreen content as well. So I was going to play the last video.
Sure, yeah.
Have you ever wondered why so many rivers and streams in California are covered in cement like the LA River? I'm seeing a lot of videos right now in California with flooding and people saying, we weren't prepared for this. The cement was to prepare for this, but we were preparing wrong. This is something I teach kids about with friends of the LA River. We're gonna jump in a time machine. It's 1938, and over the course of 5 days in February and March, LA, Southern California, got as much rain as it does normally in an entire year. That's a lot of rain. $1.5 billion in damage in today's money. Over 100 people died. It's one of the biggest disasters in LA history. And not just LA, it was Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, entire communities wiped out. We had to do something about that, right? So LA debated between an emerald necklace, which would be a series of parks all along the river to handle any floodwaters, or cement. Which one did we choose? Cement is obviously not porous, so in all these streams and rivers up and down the state of California that are cemented, water can't get through to the ground. It gets funneled through. And in our cities with cement and sidewalks and freeways, water just pulls up. That's why we're having flooding, not because we didn't prepare, but because we prepared the wrong way. When cement prevents water from soaking into the ground, that cuts off our groundwater supply, which is something that we could use during drought years. Climate change is only going to make these droughts and floods worse. Can you imagine how cool it would be if we had chosen the emerald necklace over cement and we had a wild river with 51 miles of parks along it? Can you imagine how cool it would be if we cracked the concrete and changed it to that now? Ooh.
So, when did you post this one?
That was actually my first really big viral video.
Oh, wow.
And that was January. It was in December of 2022.
Wow. So 3 years ago.
Yeah, a little over 3 years ago. And that winter was one of the first, we had been on a multi-year mega drought,
Yes.
was being called, but we had already had a bunch of big storms. And so that's at the beginning. The context is people were posting videos of flooding, streets flooding in their neighborhoods and being like, why aren't we doing anything about but so that's sort of the context.
Why aren't we saving all this water?
Yeah.
That was the big conversation, yeah.
Right. Why aren't we saving it? Why is the infrastructure not set up for this? And all that was a very historic year of multiple atmospheric rivers and all that.
That's crazy.
But I think at my measuring at home, that rain year, we got, I think I was up to 30-something inches. LA's average rain, downtown LA at least, it's a little different is around 15 inches in a normal year. Mm-hmm. So it was an extreme amount of rain. And then last winter was pretty high as well.
Yeah.
This winter, not so much. No. But I think we're talking about evergreen content. And that video, I start seeing my notifications will be shared every time there's a storm in LA. Because they're, again, thinking about the same thing and what's going on with this water, and then they start seeing that again. So it's not necessarily evergreen, but it's like a plant like a wildflower that kind of comes back every year.
Yeah.
Every winter, this video gets shared again and gets more views. Gets like last winter, another couple 100,000 views added to it. I think it's up to 1.7 million right now.
And I like to call this kind of like the long tail of content, right? Because sometimes you post it, and your boss is like, how many views did you get? Or like, holy, you got 1,000? But then you get like this long tail of viewership that lasts over months or even years. And I think too, like if you're, I saw there was a bunch of people that raised their hand that said that they were new to like the transit world in general. Like you should look back at your content library and be like, hey, the person who I don't even know produced some really cool stuff like way back in the day. Like, is there an opportunity? Because if you're producing that much content and there are things happening in the world, or an announcement or something, like maybe you can go back to some historical stuff and pull that up and sort of use it as evergreen. So you're not always having to produce like that next, video, which can be really daunting, can be really exhausting, can be really tiring. But if you're to look back at that previous content, I think there's an opportunity.
I think that's a very good recommendation. Or just even go back and look at all the content and how did it do?
Yeah.
And which ones did well, and then think about why. And then also think about, well, this one was such a good video, but why didn't it get seen? Maybe there was something else that didn't work with it. I'll give you an example. Last year, I made a video about eagles. So the sound you hear for an eagle in most movie and TV is that kind of high-pitched, I can't even do it, that high-pitched screech. Very common, but that is actually not the sound that an eagle makes. They sound more like a seagull. That's actually a red-tailed hawk that makes that high-pitched screech. And red-tailed hawks are really common around LA. So this is like a Hollywood thing. They're like, that just sounds more like we want the eagle to sound. So we're gonna change the sound and make everyone think that that's what it is. But so I made that video and I posted it last year around the Oscars. It's like a Hollywood story, and nobody cared. And I was talking with some friends about that, and they're like, well, maybe like 4th of July is actually better. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. So I deleted the video and just reposted it, like on July 2nd, shortly right when everyone's thinking about 4th of July. And then it did really well and got like 150,000 views. It went from like 1,000 views to 150. Like,
wow.
Because the timing part, and it was just more relevant to what people were thinking about. So
that's awesome.
So it's something that can have.
What I love
that's
too,
the timing aspect.
Well, I think too, what I love is these like new tools with like TikTok, for instance, where like you can remix an old video, right, and like provide additional content or context, right, just by like talking to the camera. And then you're doing something cool now with automated DMs, right? Yeah,
that's right. Okay, so I started seeing this, and I'm like, what is that? Is someone really taking the time? So it's in a post, you can say comment a certain word, and I'll DM you the link of whatever this is. I use it for signing a petition. If I at the festival trails time, it could have been like to the website to email the mayor, or it could just be like to an event that I'm hosting, or I'm selling tickets for one of my educational things. It's not an actual person going in there and then each time someone comments, clicking on their profile and sending them the link. It's an automated system and it's free. It just comes with a little like ad when they send the link that shows who's sending it. But first of all, it's an easy way. It's easier for people to find the link than going into the link in bio. And like less steps. You just like, oh, okay, I'll comment. And then when they comment, it's like engagement on the post. So it boosts the post and gets more people. So I've just been able to get people's attention to different things so much easier, and it's hands off. The only thing is now all those people are in my DM inbox. Oh, no. And we'll then start responding to other stuff, and now we're like, oh, hi. People I don't know. But still, it's just a great way for people to get involved, just making it easier for them. Awesome. And also to maybe get more engagement on whatever it is you're trying to get people to see.
Awesome. Well, we have about like 10-ish minutes. There's some networking time after this, so I thought I'd open it up and see if any of you had questions for me and Jason. I guess, there we go, perfect. We got mics in the back, so if we have no questions, y'all can go enjoy the sunshine. But okay, we got some questions.
The hazy sunshine.
Yeah.
So on this, comments back with Hammer climate issue. Obviously, as communicators, we have a lot of messages, jobs, and talk about that. There's a certain audience that does care about the climate. As communicators, we're grounded in facts. How do you continue that message when a lot of the population disagrees with the premise of the facts?
Yeah, and I think it definitely has to be sort of contextual to where you are, right? I don't necessarily think that message, we have like sort of multiple sub-messages. We talk a lot about jobs because we work a lot with our folks in the unions and about like how do we create really good jobs here that stay here that aren't, that can't turn to AI. I mean, I think one way that I really like to talk about the work that we do too, that really resonates with, kind of a crowd that, has a different sense on climate change. I really lean into kind of public safety, right? In the sense of not in sort of we need more armed enforcement, but that here in California at least we have an epidemic of traffic fatalities, right? We have more people that died on our streets than we had homicides last year. And when if there was a rash of homicides, and people would be in a community would be calling for politicians to hire more armed enforcement, right? Well, we've got people dying on our streets, pedestrians, mothers, fathers, cousins, uncles, kids who are being harmed by traffic. And so when you're talking about safe streets, first, last mile, right, immediately, like how do we have safer places for people to walk and bike? That really resonates. How do we get people out of their cars? Because the reality is the less driver trips you have, the less fatalities you have, right? So if you can reduce VMT, which obviously also helps with greenhouse gas emissions, you can also reduce those tragic deaths that really didn't need to happen. And also, for the most part, I mean, obviously every now and then there are incidents on public transit, but I'd like to say, I was talking earlier about that period when we had this horrific incident on transit, and I, a week or two later, sort of like took the train and just was like, I had a great experience. No incidents, no problems. Everybody who traveled on the train trip with me, had no problems. And 99% of the time, your riders are having no incidents on the train. But of course, it's that 1% that's getting the media attention. And so, I like to kind of remind people about that as well, and try to change the narrative as much as I can. Yeah.
I would add, well, first of all, we're talking about pedestrian fatalities. Just a couple of weeks ago, I almost got hit by a car crossing the street, and the person they made a left and went sped up into a group of us, and we kind of split and then went between. It was really frightening and harrowing. It makes me and now every time I'm crossing the street, I'm just not trusting the cars around. So, I mean, I just to point out how much I feel that, but when it comes to climate change, and I talk about, did I mention it in all three of those? I know that, I'm trying to think.
The river one, yeah.
The river one, definitely, but
yeah,
I like to try and talk about the things that we already can obviously see and know, and you're observing, and then a little bit later, connect it to and by the way, that's climate change. So there's the things that even if you've been kind of conditioned and whatever your news source or whatever it is that sort of made you distrust, but you are seeing these other things, right? And so at least connecting that first, and then maybe that sort of helps to break down the distrust of those scary words, climate change, But it's difficult, and there will always be. On that LA River video, there were a number of comments that were you had me until climate change. And I've made videos actually addressing that directly. Why is that? Why are we scared of that? You understand all these other things that are happening, and floods and droughts and whatever, But that, once we got there, we stopped. Like, let's examine that. Because I think that's important. That's a whole much broader issue, but I think each time you're kind of bringing up the things that people won't disagree with because they see it happening, that like helps to chip away at it a little bit. And it's a gargantuan task, I know. I mean, anyone who's trying to communicate about any of the issues around environmental, it's a big leap, but I think we just gotta keep doing it and keep chipping away.
Yeah, and I'm sure we got another question, but I know that there's right now, like, with the USDOT, right, there's like an attack on equity, there's an attack on greenhouse gas emissions. I was talking with the chief equity officer for LA Metro just yesterday. But at the end of the day, like, you have to serve everyone, right? Like, regardless of who they are, or their background, right? You're serving immigrants, you're serving trans people, you're serving people with disabilities, and you have to welcome them all, and that's your job. And I think it's just, again, like, tune out the noise, focus on what's happening in your local community.
Got a question.
Uh-oh.
Great presentation this morning.
Thanks, Aaron.
So, LA's had some devastating fires that have impacted communities and families, and obviously related to climate change. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about communications about what's been going on with the fires.
I don't know. Do you want to?
Sure, I can talk a little bit, yeah. I kind of mentioned that a bit earlier about how I had all these plans and then the fires happened. I actually had a plan. I posted a video that day that they both started, where the Palisades Fire had already started, and used some early pictures of it to talk, and that was a video about kind of climate change. And I was anticipating that there could be something that day. But I think then, of course, everything kind of changed, and I'm like, well, this becomes this huge, massive, devastating event, and I had to pause for a little bit to be like, what do you even say from this? Yeah. One of the other videos we talked about possibly showing, but we didn't, but was...
it's a good one.
One where I talk about the LA River, I kind of rehashed a lot of the themes from that, and you all laughed at, like, which one did we choose? Like, I sort of kind of rehashed the history of the river, but using it as a lesson for the current disaster. So what was once the biggest disaster in LA history versus what is now the present biggest disaster in LA history. And how did we react to the LA River flooding as we tried to control nature and lock it up? And there's lots of individuals talking about trying to control nature again when it comes to fires, like clear-cutting the wilderness around LA, which is one of the signature things that people love about living here, is that we're in a big city, but you can escape it right there.
Yeah.
Rather than locking it up, or like, we can build whatever we want and control nature, but instead working with nature. Like, what do we plant in our yards that's less flammable? How do we build our houses so they're less flammable, so that we can live together with the ecosystem and us, and being with sort of, as instead of the enemy, as our ally.
Yeah.
So it was just about kind of how, that was one way that really just sort of resonated with me, made sense one day. And it's difficult to kind of to talk about those things, but I think giving people a little bit of hope, or a new context of understanding it, or some ideas for the future. That one I did that comment LA and get a link to this petition that was about working with indigenous local tribes and traditional ecological knowledge, and rebuilding with resiliency and native plants that are fire resistant, and that kind of thing, like something so people can go sign this petition and like imagine a hopeful future, rather than just kind of feel like there's nothing I can do. This is all just so terrible, but to have a little bit of hope. in the midst of a very hopeless
All the
situation.
tragedy. Yeah. And I hope we get like 400 new followers on both of our accounts from all of this. I hope you're all logging on and following. I mean, I've really struggled with this one. You know, LA is so big and yet small in the sense of like, I have a board member who lost his home. I have another board member who lost her synagogue. I have multiple friends who've lost their homes. And so like the tragedy impacts all of us, I think, here in Los Angeles, and the response has been really incredible. It's been tough for me because our organization really is about like big, bold, visionary, long-term change. And so like when something like this happens, it kind of like, we kind of have to reset, but we're trying to like integrate it into the work that we do. Like our photographer, for instance, a longtime photographer, grew up in Altadena, has been taking pictures, and so we're going to display some of his work at our upcoming policy conference and auction that off to like raise money and raise awareness. But you know, I think there's a public transit piece of this in that, you know, there's a lot of conversation about like all these cars that got abandoned on this one road in the Palisades, you know, because people literally like were stuck in traffic and the flames were coming and they had to get out and they like literally got out of their cars, abandoned their $100,000 Mercedes and BMWs and just ran. You know, and we have in Altadena actually Metro Micro, which is like a micro mobility service, and they know the streets, they know how to get around, and these are opportunities. You know, a lot of the people who actually lost their lives were people with disabilities who just had no way to get out because of mobility challenges. And so public transit can actually play a huge role in getting people out of these disasters, right? You know, you can put 60 people on a bus, right? And you can pick up people in these micro mobility you know, things. And so I think, you know, the industry also needs to think about like how it trains its operators to be disaster response folks as well. So I think that would be my kind of takeaway on that. I think we had a question over, no? Are we good? Okay. I think we got like time for like one more question, right?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Sonia. I work for Foursquare Integrated Transportation Planning. Transportation planning is inherently very forward-looking. It's about designing the future.
Yeah.
So for engagement in transportation planning, it's a conversation about very good ideas, but good ideas about something that could happen 5 or 10 or 20 years from now, and that takes away that element of instant gratification and having people know that their lives can be improved tomorrow. So it's a bit of a tougher sell, and a lot of what you're working on is also visionary. So I want to hear about your approach to coming at things that are hypotheticals many years down the line,
Right.
Very good ideas, but people won't have it tomorrow, even in the best of circumstances. How do you sell them on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, despite all of this public investment that we've been able to get, there was a period of 7 years where LA Metro did not have like a single rail line open, which, you know, I think was a problem because, you know, we sold voters on this idea of like, you know, you're going to tax yourself. They all voted for it. And then they're like, well, where's the stuff I voted for, right? And they like want to know right away. And this is the same challenge we're having right now with affordable housing. So we've tried really hard to like bring it, well, first of all, funding things that like can happen right away. Like for instance, like we funded with our affordable housing stuff, like a lot of tenant protection, right? Which, you know, you can say like, hey, we kept these people housed like today, right? And that's a big deal in a place where we have the largest homeless population in the country. But I think, you know, what I encourage LA Metro to do, and I think they've done a better job, is like, don't wait to open up like 7 stations all at once when they're perfect and everybody's ready. Like try to open up stuff every single year, even if it's just 1 station, which I'm seeing them do a lot more because it kind of creates that momentum. And even things like opening up a bus only lane, which might not, it's just paint, right? Like they've done some really good job, the marketing folks, I gotta give them credit, of like, you know, they got the big bus banner and they break through the thing and like, you know, it's good, it looks good on TV, right? Yeah, but it's just a little bit of paint, right? But like trying to come up with ways to continue to get in the news cycle, you know, on things like that. But again, I mean, you know, just kind of showing some of the basics, like, hey, somebody complained about this elevator being out, we fixed it, is going to show kind of momentum towards your goals. But yeah, I mean, it can be tough. The other thing, and I would lean into kind of what you do with the work, is like a current call to action, right? So maybe it isn't like maybe it's something you're planning for 20 years from now, but you're probably talking to people about it because like there's an upcoming meeting where they can give feedback. So giving them a call to action that is temporal, that is closer to now, I think is going to be important. The other thing, I mean, the big challenge with all of this and long-term planning is like you go out and you do public engagement, and then you go into your room and do the engineering documents or planning documents, and then you come back 2 years later and people are like, huh, what? Like, what are you talking about? And you got to go back to the drawing table. So I think that's a big challenge. We have to accelerate the time by which we are doing all this planning work, which I know is a resource issue, but like we really need to be accelerating and showing people more momentum, because I think that's really what they're looking for.
I would say, so I think the Olympic Festival trail video is kind of like that.
Right.
Where it's something, well, in that case, I guess 4 years with the Olympics.
Yeah.
But either way is showing this hopeful vision of what the future could be. Here's the plan, here's an idea. And just kind of using that as its inspiration. This is what we could do. And then maybe the call to action to help it, push it forward, maybe to even push it faster. But I like to work in a hopeful space, hopeful kind of mindset, I guess. I like to say hope is a survival strategy, but I also kind of like to say hope plus action is a survival strategy. Because once you, like, fostering hope and doing something about it fosters more hope. And being that positive, that's helped you to make that better future that you want to see, including helping to steward along a long-term plan, right? And including for people themselves just to feel like they have some agency in the world rather than feeling hopeless. And it's, so highlight the parts of that plan that are just like, oh yeah, people are gonna love this. And this is what we could do. We don't have to go with the status quo. This is not the end game. The end is not here. We can create a better future. And one other thing would be to just repeat it. One thing I've learned from social media is that people have a very short-term memory and forget what you posted. So it's not like, well, I just posted about that last month. Like, keep posting about it, because we'll just keep kind of building that foundation, and then eventually more and more people will actually remember. But it's okay to keep doing content, to put out information about the same things. Because when you're scrolling through thousands of things all week, you kind of forget about that, and then it's like, oh yeah, that. It's good to kind of repeat and keep pushing that hope for this plan of how we can make your city, your community better and more connected.
And I would also add, we've been doing some really cool things with AI in the urban environment. Like, there's some cool tools out there that, like, you can take like an existing, piece of infrastructure or like a visual, and then be able to like overlay what it could look like with AI. And we've been able to like really wow people without much investment on just simple things like, hey, we're gonna take Grand Avenue and pedestrianize it. This is what it could look like. So they can actually see that visual. And that's been really cool to kind of use tools like that to kind of show something, like really visualize it for them. So, all right, I think we're at 10 o'clock exactly. All right, that's it. That's the show. Thanks, man.